Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Serena, and in today's video we're going to be sewing up another swing coat set. I have been just wrapped up in the look of a swing coat with a matching dress, whether the dress matched the lining or the outer fabric. And so I have been wanting to make them because I also feel like they're very versatile pieces, especially because it doesn't stay cold where I live for very long. So this dress in particular, I wanted it to be perfect for fall, winter, but then also without the duster, I think it would be perfect for the spring, depending on how I accessorize. So I'm going to show a couple of my inspiration pieces up here somewhere. I'm so excited to share this project with you guys. It came out way better than I could ever have imagined. Like, blew my mind when I got to try it on in the end. So I can't wait to share this with you. Go ahead and like and subscribe if you enjoy content like this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. For the dress pattern, I'm using McCall's 4955 in a size 12 bust 32. I'll be going with view A because it has that cute little cutout, and it's a very simple dress for this look. The pattern was copywritten in 1959, and it's among the first patterns to make it into my collection. However, this will be the very first time that I'm using it. For the duster, I'll be using a housecoat pattern, Simplicity 4471 in a size 12 bust 30. This pattern was copywritten in 1953, and I went with this duster because it's the exact shape of what I'm trying to recreate. With minor adjustments like lengthening the sleeves and changing the collar, I'll get exactly what I want. For the fabric, I'm going with this 100% cotton brown Swiss dot fabric. This is for the dress and the matching lining of the duster. Now for the main outer fabric of the duster, I went with this faux silk di peony in a very chocolate brown. It's so beautiful, and it has a nice structure to it, so it's going to hold the shape in a way that I think will be stunning. We are jumping straight into sewing the skirt. I have to do a 4-gore skirt, and they're all cut on the bias. So I did this first so that way I can go ahead and get the side seams put together and have it hang on the dress form as soon as possible. For neat and tidy seams, I am doing French seams, so you can see that here. I will link above a video on how to do French seams and other seam finishes. The reason you want to hang your circle skirts or bias cut skirts on your dress form as soon as possible is so that way the skirt fibers can settle and you won't have an uneven hem because you'll be able to cut it and fix it accordingly. So I let mine hang for a couple days, but the pattern says that you only need to hang it for 1 to 2 days. Don't forget to stay stitch the waistline within the seam allowance so that way it doesn't stretch out while on your dress form or hanging. Now it's time to move on to the bodice. I already have the bodice pieces cut, and then I use a bit of carbon paper and a tracing wheel to add my darts to this bodice. Then I take it over to my sewing machine where I sew up all of the darts, and then I move on to stay stitching the neckline on this bodice. You want to be very careful with stay stitching, especially on a decorative neckline like this, because any stretching will warp the cutout. Once the stay stitching is complete, then I bring the front and back bodice together by sewing up the side seams. I sew the right side with French seams, and then I sew the left side partially, leaving an opening for the zip. This is a side zip dress. At this point, the shoulder seams are still open, and you want to leave them open because we have to put on our facing, and this is an all-in-one facing, but you do have the option to completely line it if you want to do something like that and alter the pattern. The facing is very similar to the front bodice piece, so I'm going to show you now how I got that cut out and I was able to get the markings on there so crisp. I used some carbon paper in my tracing wheel to make sure that I imprinted the marking exactly where it is. Then I remove the tracing paper, the tracing wheel, and then I just cut it out with some scissors. You can't see the line that's drawn on here, but it is there, and I get a nice crisp, even and identical placement of the cutout on both the facing and the front bodice. So I marked pivoting points since it's very angular when I stitch this around, and each point is 5/8 of an inch away from the edge because I just want to make sure this is nice and sharp and crisp. So I'm going to do that now. So like I said in that last clip, I went ahead and marked the places where I was going to pivot to make it so much easier to get a even cutout, because you want your right and left side to look as close to identical as possible. And so that's what I did. It was very helpful and I was able to smoothly get around these corners. After that, you want to stay stitch as far as you can so that way everything lays flat and the facing doesn't roll forward. I cut down my seam allowances with pinking shears. These are all the seam allowances that's located within the facing because all of the showing facings, I used a French seam for my finishes. So these won't be noticeable. And it helps with cutting around curves and getting a smooth turn when you flip the facing to the inside. Now we stay stitch the waistline of the bodice because again, you don't want it to stretch out, and when it's time to combine the bodice and the skirt, you want everything to line up perfectly. And if you find that you've cut everything nicely, sewn everything nicely, and your bodice and your skirt does not line up, it's probably because one or the other stretched. Stay stitch the facing all the way around as far as you can get it. This you should be able to get all the way up the shoulders, and then after that it's time to put it right sides together and sew up the shoulders, making sure that you don't accidentally sew onto the facing. So make sure you tuck it in and press it, and then after you sew those shoulders up, then you're going to hand stitch the facing. Now you just attach the bodice to the skirt and then hem by hand to your desired length of skirt. I think I did a 3-inch hem on this skirt because I wanted to make sure that my skirt did not end up being longer than the duster. Oh, and don't forget your zipper either. Now it's time to start working on the duster with right sides together. I'm sewing down the center back seam. This is a very, very simple pattern. If you've done any kind of a raglan overcoat, house coat, anything like that, you are more than prepared to make something like this. The material was easy to work with. Just make sure that you switch out your needle for a new needle when you're going with more delicate fabrics or fabrics that have like a sheen or can easily pull or end up with runs. It's worth switching out your needle for a project like this. So that's exactly what I did. Then I put the back piece down and grabbed the front of the coat because I'm doing bound buttonholes. You always want this to be your first step when working with the front of your coat before you add sleeves or anything like that. You want to put your bound buttonholes in first. I'm going with 3 really large buttonholes because I have 3 really large statement buttons. I am using my Vintage Singer Professional Buttonholer attachment. This is a universal buttonholer attachment for low shank machines. It also comes in a slant shank option. Once my buttonholes are in, it's time to attach the front sleeves. This pattern comes with a 2-piece sleeve, so you want to attach the front sleeves to the front 2 pieces, and then you add the back sleeve to the back. After the sleeves are attached, then this pretty much turns into like a 3-piece pattern because the sleeves are already on there. Of course, you do need to add the cuffs to the sleeves and things like that, but after that, everything comes together very, very quickly. You put the front and back right sides together and you sew down the shoulder seams and then the side seams, and you pretty much have what resembles a robe or a coat. Now let's talk about the alterations that I made, because I did say I had to make some alterations to the coat. I naturally have really long arms, especially for someone who is my height. I have really long arms, so I always have to lengthen sleeves depending on where it's supposed to hit me. But because I do want this to be a little bit longer than 3/4 of the way, I added about 2 to 3 inches to my sleeves, and keeping in mind that you have an external cuff on it as well. Then the house coat came with more of a rounded Peter Pan collar, and I wanted a very sharp dagger-like collar, so I straightened out the collar a bit and I increased the height by 1 inch so that way it would really stand up if I ever had my hair up when I wore this outfit. And last but not least, the last alteration was to add a lining to it, very similar to my brocade set that I made over the summer. I used a house coat pattern for that, so I had to draft a lining, and so I used the existing coat pieces to help me make a lining for this one as well. I would say in a lot of situations the linings aren't very important when it comes to like coats, because in a lot of cases, especially for me, I make suit coats and jackets, so my linings don't really show. But when I make these duster jackets, like swing jackets, they are a very important detail to the complete look because a lot of times if you've seen them pictured, they are open for you to be able to see. And not to say that linings are not important when you can't see them, because when you can't see them, at least for my sewing, I always want something with a lot of slip. So I use like a satin or a taffeta to make sure that it slides against whatever I'm wearing underneath the jacket. In this case, I went with cotton, which I don't usually do, so that way it matched exactly to the dress. But I would say if you had it available to you, then go with more of a brushed or polished cotton or cotton sateen for a dress like this. However, in the end, I do think that a simple cotton did end up working for me. Also, I like the added structure of a basic cotton with this faux silk fabric because I want that nice tint shape. And you'll see in the end that I was able to achieve that without having to stabilize the faux silk any further. Okay, so now I'm working on the lining, and so what I do is omit the facing, that's why it's folded over, but I add 5/8 to the seam allowance so that way I can have some for sewing it to the inside of the coat. And then I'm going to cut off the facing part of this, but add back 5/8 seam allowance, if that makes sense. So yeah, make sure you add seam allowances to this side and the upper side of your facing. Before I start sewing together the lining pieces, I add my monogram. It's a touch that I really like about true vintage pieces, how the original owner had their monogram or initials in the lining of the piece. So I started doing that ever since I got the Skyline, and I'm really happy with the way it turns out. And then once I put the monogram on there, I usually add an inside pocket because I don't like pockets on the side seam or even patch pockets. And here is my covered buckles. If you want a tutorial on how you can cover almost any buckle that has a flat surface on it, then I'm going to link my tutorial above, but this will have a belt buckle with a matching belt as well. These are really quick and easy to make, and they don't require a kit. But if you are interested in a kit, you should check out Stephanie Canada's website at backroomfinds.com. I bought a couple of true vintage kits there, and she has a lot to choose from. I am now adding the facing to my collar. This is one of two collars that I made. Well, three collars. I made like a muslin collar. I really like the shape, but then I made this one. I sewed it on to the coat and I was dissatisfied with how tall or big it was. So then I took it off and made an even bigger collar later, and I only made it bigger by making the height higher, so an inch higher than I had originally drafted. But this is the process on how to add the collar to the neckline. Make sure that you stay stitched in the neckline and do everything that you need to do to make sure it doesn't stretch out while you sew this on, because this fabric isn't very forgiving. This is the look of the first collar on. It looks really good and I like it, but it's not the collar that I was going for. If I did not have a particular look in mind, then I would have left it this way, but because I wanted that dramatic look, I had to change it. I did the change off camera because it's very similar to the other one. Like, it's almost not noticeable, the change, but it is a little taller and sharper. And now we're moving on to making the belt. I'm using a 1-inch wide cotton webbing to make this belt. I am following the directions on the pattern. I know I get a lot of questions on how I make my belts because I made a buckle tutorial, but the truth is a lot of these dress patterns come with instructions on how to make the belt, and they're so simple and easy to follow if you know how to apply interfacing, because most of the time I do not use webbing. If you know how to apply interfacing, then you are more than capable of following directions on how to make a belt. This is the first time that I've made one like this, and so it was a new method that I learned, but you pretty much just make like an envelope for the webbing to sit inside, and then you flip it inside out so that way the webbing tucks into it like a little envelope, and then you stitch down the center seam, which I'm going to show you the seam later after I fix this point. Here is the inside of the belt. That's the center seam that I was showing. The webbing is tucked inside, and so I'm just going to go hand stitch down the center of that and then attach the belt. This is a slide belt, so I don't have to add any eyelets. I just have to put it on and slide it through, and this is the final look. This is the duster or swing coat clothes with the 3 large buttons. I love it. I love the length. I love the shape. It's so beautiful. This is the inside. Everything matches perfectly. If you haven't already, please give this video a like. It will really help push it through the algorithm. Don't forget to leave me a little comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this outfit and the process. Special thanks to my bobbins over on Patreon. If you would like to support this channel any further, you can leave me a virtual tip over on Ko-Fi or become a bobbin over on Patreon, where you get sneak peeks and exclusive videos from me. I would love to have you, but keep in mind the easiest way and the cheapest way to support this channel is to go ahead and like it, subscribe, and share this video with someone you think that might be interested. I love how this turned out, especially with the proper undergarments with the full slip and everything. It's very full in the back in a way that you couldn't tell on the dress form. I hope you enjoyed this project because I enjoyed making it for you guys. I paired it with a true vintage hat that one of my subscribers had sent me a couple years ago, and it's just perfect. It matches the faux satin perfectly, and it even has like a beautiful band of velvet going across the bottom of it. It's just a beautiful look, and I feel like I'm on top of the world wearing this garment. So thank you guys so much. I hope you have a beautiful and lovely, safe rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.